Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's light gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the rampart we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the
Good evening, everyone. Is this on? Can you hear me? My name is Mayor David Narkowitz. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Northampton High School and the city of Northampton. What a great crowd. We're so excited to have Senator Markey here, and of course, even more excited that he's co-sponsoring with Representative Ocasio-Cortez the Green New Deal. My role tonight is just to welcome you, but obviously for those of you who live in Northampton or live in any of the other communities in the Valley, you know how committed we are here at the grassroots to dealing with these two twin issues of our climate crisis as well as the economic crisis in this country of economic disparity and economic injustice. So we are so excited for Senator Markey's leadership in bringing forth the Green New Deal. So thank you. I'm now going to introduce our other elected officials who are going to come out and say a quick hello to you before we get on to the main event. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our State Representative Lindsay Sabadosa.
Good evening, Northampton. I am so delighted to be here, and I am so delighted that our senator is here in Western Massachusetts today to talk about the Green New Deal. I spend a lot of time in the State House telling my colleagues how I come from the best district in Massachusetts, the loudest district in Massachusetts, the most active district in Massachusetts. And you prove me right every time I open my mailbox or my email. And today, someone in this crowd sent me a wonderful article about what I should say when I got up here to speak. And it was about the face of climate change. And she said, the face of climate change right now is Mozambique. The face of climate change is the flooding that's happening in the Midwest. Now, those may seem like far away and like they have nothing to do with this district, but we know that that is not true because we know that the United States produces 26% of carbon emissions. So the Green New Deal. What is the Green New Deal? I'm going to leave a lot of this to Senator Markey to explain in depth, but the way I like to think about it is the Green New Deal being our new North Star. And we have a lot of North Stars right now, right? We need to demand better from our government. We need to demand things like Medicare for all. We need to demand debt-free higher ed. 100% renewable energy, the end to mass incarceration, and the dismantling of systems of structural racism and income inequality. And the Green New Deal, whether you realize it right now or not, actually relates to all of those things because these things are interconnected. And Senator Markey will explain what this resolution means, and while you have some great elected officials, we are not the sole leaders. The sole leaders are the young people who are sitting in this audience. Show of hands, how many Sunrise Movement folks do we have here today? Oh, we're gonna need to do better, Northampton. I would like to now introduce Senator Joe Comerford to the stage.
What an amazing sight. From up here, you can feel it, isn't it? Yeah, we should clap for that. It's a gorgeous thing. Coming out and seeing the sea of people here to celebrate Senator Markey's leadership for the Green New Deal is just, it's actually something that's actually the embodiment of breathtaking. So I have the great privilege of introducing someone who, for us here in Northampton, in this congressional district, needs very little introduction. So I'm going to tell you a story about Jim McGovern, which is that yeah, we should clap for Jim McGovern, too. Thank you, Rep. Dom, for clapping for Jim McGovern immediately. So I, like you, I'm sure, were watching Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's momentum coming into Congress and saying, no, we need to put 3 words together, Green New Deal. We need something that tackles the crisis of climate change. We need something that really creates the kind of jobs that are lasting, that will help build up our communities, and we need an environmental justice commitment so that communities of color, those most affected by climate change, are at the center of the solution. So she was leading this, and she was asking members of Congress, of the House, to join her. And who was one of the first adopters to stand at her side? Jim McGovern. Jim McGovern stepped out, stepped out, and there is a picture of Jim McGovern standing staunchly on the right side of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right there, straightforward, saying to our district, saying to the people of the United States, yes, this is a viable idea. Yes, we will break it through in Congress. Jim was one of the earliest adopters. He's on the right side of that issue, as we count on him in this district to be on the right side of so many issues. And, you know, I have a joke. When I was at Move On, as campaign director, we used to go around and we used to say, who's your member of Congress in the House? And I would say, well, you know, my member of Congress is Jim McGovern. And people would go, oh, my goodness, you're so lucky. Oh, and there would be like these visceral groans of relief that someone like Jim McGovern was there in Congress leading the way. And not only is he leading the way now as a member of the body, but he's the chair of the Rules Committee. And so as chair, not only will he be useful to so many other issues that we care so deeply about, and we could name a litany of them, but you know them in your heart, but he will be there not only in name right next and body right next to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not only as an incredible ally to our Senator Ed Markey, who stepped out boldly in the Senate to plant a stake and say, we can do this in the Senate too. But Jim will help create the rules around which this will become more than an idea. It will become a reality. So join me in welcoming Jim McGovern.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, first of all, let me thank the incredible Joe Comerford for that wonderful introduction. I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say after that build-up. But I am so happy to be here with all of you, troublemakers who are gathered here at Northampton High School. And we need you now more than ever before. Your activism and your passion on issues is needed so much right now, given what we are dealing with in Washington. And we're here to talk about the Green New Deal, but there's a lot of things that have been going on the last couple of hours. All right, and I just want to say something very briefly, and that is that I've been asked by reporters, a couple of reporters, over and over and over again the last hour, you know, what do you think of the Mueller report? And my response is, well, I don't know. I'll let you know when I read it. But I will not, Senator Markey will not, Democrats in Congress will not be satisfied with a short, brief letter from Donald Trump's handpicked Attorney General telling us what he thinks is important. We need to see the entire report, and we can make our own minds up. And, you know, and let me just say this, you know, I don't need a report to tell me or you that this is probably the most corrupt administration in U.S. history. I mean, and I'm not even exaggerating, and you know, I mean, based on what we already know. I mean, they make Richard Nixon look like a Boy Scout. But here's the deal. After 22 months of investigation, there have been 37 defendants charged, 7 guilty pleas, 1 conviction at a trial so far, and that's not even getting into what's coming down the road in terms of indictments and jail sentences and everything else, you know, that will happen, you know, by U.S. attorneys all throughout this country. So, look, bottom line is this. This is the United States of America. This is not Russia. You are entitled to know what your government knows, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that that report is made public. So I just wanted to get that on the very beginning. Now, look, I'm so happy to be with all of you here today because I'll be honest with you, coming here gives me incredible hope about what we can do and what can get done. You know, and we're here tonight to talk about the Green New Deal and about the climate crisis that is real. We're all here because we believe in science. We don't think it's a radical idea to believe in science. And, you know, and what I have learned, you know, as I've traveled across my district, is that it's not just kind of older people who understand that this is a problem. I was at Crocker Farm Elementary School in Amherst the other day speaking to first graders who sent me a bunch of letters on how important the environment is to them and how they want Congress to do more to protect the environment. So first graders get it, but we have colleagues in Congress that don't get it, and we have a President of the United States that doesn't get it. But Ed Markey and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez helped develop a roadmap for us, the Green New Deal. And I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of it. And as Joe Comerford said, I'm now the chairman of the Rules Committee, so we have a little bit of sway in what goes to the floor and, you know, what our priorities are. And protecting this planet has to be at the top of our priority list. And we... And I have been amazed, I'm sure you have been too, kind of stunned at the reaction by some of the critics. You know, I thought they would say, well, you know, yeah, we understand that climate change is real, that the climate crisis is for real. We don't like your approach, so here's our approach. They didn't do that. They don't acknowledge that we have a climate crisis. What they try to do is say, well, this is a socialist idea, or this is, oh, you want to take away our hamburgers, or, you know, or we'll never be able to fly on an airplane again. I mean, all these kind of fear tactics, that's what they do when they don't have any facts on their side. And what we need to do is we need to push back, and we need to go around them. And the Green New Deal sets out a series of goals, and what we have to do is we have to fill in all that goes behind those goals to make sure that they're implemented. And that's what we're going to be working on in the next several months, is to try to put some meat on the bones of the Green New Deal and actually do something and start turning things around. And so this is not a radical idea, quite frankly. I mean, this is a common sense, quite frankly, very sensible and conservative idea. If you care about this planet, then you want to be behind the Green New Deal. If you care about our kids and you care about making sure that their future is bright and that we have our planet is livable for generations and generations and generations to come, then you need to get behind the Green New Deal. And we have nothing to apologize for. We should not get defensive. In fact, we should be on the offense and saying to our fellow elected officials at every level in government that if you're not with us on this, then we're not going to be with you. It is that simple. I mean, we can argue about how we get there, and we can argue about this might be the better way to do it, or this might be the better way to do it, but there's no arguing that we have a climate crisis and that the time has long since come for us to take action. And so we are lucky in Massachusetts that we have a senator who has taken the lead on this issue. But not only when he was in the Senate, when he was in the House. Ed Markey has been committed to this planet and to environmental justice for as long as I can remember. And there is nobody in the United States Congress, House or Senate, who understands these issues more, who has been more creative in thinking out of the box on how we can achieve positive results in dealing with climate change, more than Ed Markey. And so I am thrilled to be his ally on this legislation. We are going to work together, and we're going to work with you to make this a reality, and we're going to make a difference. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present our great senator, Senator Ed Markey.
Thank you all. Thank you all, and thank you for electing Jim McGovern as your voice in Washington. There is no more powerful position than the chairman of the Rules Committee, and what we have here is, yes, an incredible national and international leader on hunger, on immigration, but on any issue that deals with fairness in our society. When you Google the word fairness, Jim McGovern's picture comes up. That's who he is. He fights every day with a passion for those most in need in our society. And this climate issue is one that affects everyone on our planet. And that's why I am so proud to be partnered with Jim, but to be here with you this evening, because there's one thing you can say about Northampton and Western Massachusetts is that you are not in science denial, okay? I am here with a group of people who accept science, and it is my honor to be here and hosted by David Narkowitz, my friend for 30 years. We thank you for being the great mayor of Northampton and everything that you do to make this such a special city. And to Joe Comerford, thank you so much for taking your leadership up to the State House. You've gone from fighting on education funding to advocating for the Green New Deal, to advocating for economic justice, and we thank you so much for all of your leadership, Joe. And Lindsay Sabadosa also up there making a mark on day one, a passionate advocate for health care and equal access for women. And you're off to a running head start up in the State House, and we're just so proud of you and thank you for being here this evening. And it's just an all-star cast which has, who have joined us here today. Representative Mindy Dome, who's come over from Amherst. And she co-founded the Berkshire AIDS Coalition. She's a leader on addressing the needs of the underserved communities of our state, and just an incredible advocate on climate change as well. So thank you so much for coming over, Mindy. And the great State Senator Adam Hines has come over from Pittsfield this evening. Just a champion of the Berkshires, but a champion for the whole planet, because a lot of the biggest movements in our country's history have started out here, you know, and Adam is somebody who understands that through investment, smart investment, we can create this revolution, but we need people like him who are up there in the State House, who know what they're doing, proven track record, and we're just so proud to have you here this evening, Adam. Thank you for everything that you do for our state and for our country. We're also joined by just incredible leaders from Western Massachusetts. We have Mayor Alex Morse, who is here from Holyoke. I was just with Alex a few hours ago talking about the needs of the Puerto Rican community in Holyoke. Mayor Tom Bernard of North Adams, he's come over so that we can make this, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your progressive leadership. And Mayor Nicole LaChapelle of East Hampton. Thank you, Nicole. Just an incredible leader, just a voice for sanity in our society. Thank you so much. And we have an incredible additional all-star cast. We have Amherst Town Councilor Evan Ross, who has joined us. Evan, where are you? Please stand up, Evan. Northampton School Committee member Howard Moore, thank you so much for being here. Amherst Town Councilor Darcy Dumont, where are you? Beautiful, thank you so much. Amherst Town Councilor Mandy Jo Haneke, can you please stand up, Mandy Jo? Thank you. And Shelburne Town Clerk Joseph Judd, thank you so much for being here as well. Now, we're also joined by a lot of the leaders of this movement. And Climate Action Now, thank you for all you do. Thank you, Climate Action Now. Mothers Out Front. The Sunrise Movement is in the house. Thank you. The Pioneer Valley Central Labor Council is joining us this evening. and the Hampshire Franklin Labor Council, and the Central Labor Council from out here in Western Massachusetts have all joined us here, as has State Representative Dan Carey, who has also joined us here. And thank you so much for coming over, Representative, and thank you for your leadership up in the State House. I want to mention a couple of other people. One is someone from Northampton High School, who was the co-organizer of the Youth Climate Strike. Northampton High School. Serafina Foreman. Will you please stand up, Serafina? Where are you? Serafina. And the Sunrise Movement is founded by and led by a UMass Amherst graduate. Vashini Prakash is the leader of the Sunrise Movement. She founded it and she is partnering with Serafina and her generation to make sure that we do not make the same mistake that we have made in the past years about this issue. And so that is our challenge, and we accept this challenge, and we are going to act upon it. So that's the job which Jim and I have to accomplish in Congress. So what we did was, it seems like it's been around for a long, long time, but it's only 6 weeks since we introduced the Green New Deal. And Jim and I stood with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we introduced the Green New Deal. And already we have a situation where everyone in America has a view on the Green New Deal, especially people who haven't read it yet. They feel very strongly that it's a bad idea. But what has happened is the polling has now shown that this has now risen to the very top with health care as the top issues in the Iowa caucuses. And in the first 5 primary states, California and Nevada and South Carolina and New Hampshire and Iowa, it's right up there in all of them. So it's a different era that we are now in than any previous era, where people would say, well, climate change is important, but it's down my list. Well, now, because of the UN scientific report in the end of 2018 saying that it's an existential threat, and it's no longer 2 degrees centigrade, but 1.5 degrees centigrade, and that 2030 is now the year, and no longer 2040 or 2050 in terms of when we have to take substantial action, and that the 13 federal agencies' top scientists all issued a report at the end of 2018, much to the chagrin of their boss, President Trump, all agreeing with the magnitude of the threat to our planet and to our own country, and the $400 billion worth of damage from climate-related storms and fires in 2017 and 18, $400 billion worth of damage. All of this points towards a crisis that we have to deal with. And this issue is, without question, the #1 national security, health, environment, economic, and moral issue for us to resolve for Serafina and her generation. We have to deal with this issue. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets, so we have to engage in preventative care, deploying wind and solar, deploying the storage batteries, deploying all-electric vehicles, overhauling our energy system in our country so that we are the leaders. People constantly say, well, what about China? What about India? Well, you can't preach temperance from a bar stool. You can't tell other countries what to do if you are not leading yourself. And so when the president delivers an hour and 20-minute State of the Union address 7 weeks ago and does not mention climate change, that's a message being heard in India and China. When the president doesn't mention clean energy technologies, that's a message being heard in China and India. When the president nominates a coal lobbyist to run the Environmental Protection Agency, and then the Republicans confirm that person, that is heard in China and India. When the president nominates, and the Republicans will confirm, an oil lobbyist to take over the Department of Interior, that message is heard in China and India. And so, the Green New Deal is the response to Donald Trump. It's the response to all of that denial. So we are going to rise up and we are going to deliver a message. Either you act on this or we're injecting it into the 2020 election cycle as no longer any issue, but one of the issues that is at the very top of what the responsibilities of the next president and House and Senate have to discharge. So we thank all of you for coming here this evening. We thank all of you for everything that you are doing on this issue because it all starts with us. We are, yes, we're the Bay State, but more than that, we're the brain state. We know that we can solve this problem. We know that we can save all of creation by engaging in massive job creation. We know that you can do that. And so that is why we're here this evening. We're here so that we can talk to you about these issues, so that we can have a conversation about what needs to be done. And following on what Jim said, on the Mueller report, on Attorney General Barr's response to it, we're being asked to make a judgment about a report that has been summarized down to, well, we're being asked to make a judgment on a book just reading the Cliff Notes. We're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to make sure that the American people get to know exactly what was in the Mueller report and exactly what the basis of the decision that has been made that says there is no collusion and there is no obstruction of justice. That's not going to be something that we accept until we've read it, until we understand everything that Mueller found out and everything that he didn't find out as well. All of that is going to have to come out so the American people can know exactly what happened to their elections in 2016. So again, we thank all of you for being here, and now we're ready to have a conversation with you about the Green New Deal. Thank you all for coming. So if anyone wants to start, they can come up to the microphones and begin to ask their questions. Nolan will have one microphone over here, and Christina will have another microphone over here. And if you could identify yourself and what town you're from, city, we'd appreciate it.
You're holding it for me? Thank you, I appreciate that. So my name's Jeff Singleton, I live in Montague.
Could you just speak up just a little bit?
My name is Jeff Singleton, I live up in Montague. I work for the Montague Reporter. I write for the Montague Reporter, which is a local newspaper. I've served on the Finance Committee, Energy Committee, School Committee, and I'm on the board of the Regional Transit Authority right now. I also happen to be a bit of a conservative liberal, and that means I'm not automatically embracing Green New Deal either in terms of the policy proposals or the politics of it, which I'm a little concerned about. I think you're going to have to convince, and I'm inclined to support it. I certainly believe in what is often called climate change is a reality. I don't have an issue with that. But in terms of the targets, in terms of the cost, this is going to be a huge, huge issue as we move into the presidential election of 2020. And I'm just very concerned that simply, and I'm not criticizing either of you fellas, I vote for you both, but just accusing people of being climate change deniers who might be skeptical, I think that has to be a way to consolidate the key arguments and key facts and make them into a political rhetoric that works. And I wanted to say something real quick, and I'm sorry I talked so long, but I remember going to I'm old, I'm 71, I remember going to an anti-Vietnam teach-in back in probably 67 or 68. And one of the beauties of what Chomsky and other speakers at those things did is they could do the history of Vietnam with the facts and details, consolidate that into a really understandable, respond to the more conservative arguments for the Vietnam War. They developed a great rhetoric that dealt with the details. And so I think that's super important to convince people like me. Thank you.
All right, so let me let me give you a few facts that you can use. There are now 50,000 coal miners in America. We have 350,000 in wind and solar. Who are they? They're electricians, they're roofers, they're blue-collar workers. We have 7 times as many already after decades of them blocking this revolution from taking place. And we intend on creating another 3 or 4 million of these blue-collar workers across our country who can deploy these technologies. And we intend on doing it with technologies that have already collapsed in price, wind and solar. The battery technology has already improved dramatically. All electric vehicles dropping dramatically. There were only 1,000 megawatts of solar in 2008. We now have 65,000 across our country. So we had gone nowhere up until 2008, but then Obama comes in. We have the incredible revolution that begins. We only had 25,000 megawatts of wind in 2008. We now have 98,000 megawatts of wind. Remember, the Seabrook nuclear power plant is 1,000 megawatts, so that's where we were on solar in 2008. Now we have 65,000 solar, 98,000 wind. We have 350,000 employees across this country. We have an economic case to make that it's now smarter to invest in renewables, that it's smarter to invest in the future of technology. In 2008, there were 2,000 all-electric vehicles in the United States. In 2008, 2,000 all-electric vehicles. They're going to sell 500,000 all-electric vehicles in 2019 in the United States. But we had to change the policies. We had to increase the fuel economy standards. We had to put a tax break for electric vehicles on the books. Once you change the policy, you unleash this incredible economic activity. And you create jobs, you save money, and then economically, utilities and consumers just start to buy the products without having tens of trillions of dollars that have to be spent as the Republicans lie, as they did with death panels in the Affordable Care Act, about what needs to be done. So that's going to be our case. It's an economic case. Of course, it's also a moral case. It's an environmental case. But it's an economic case that we can solve this problem without breaking the bank while creating millions of jobs. Jim.
Yeah, let me just say very, very briefly, yeah, we do have to make the case to people who are skeptical. But let's not be fooled. There are climate change deniers out there, and I serve with many of them in the United States Congress, who actually say that this is not real. This is basically made up. And up until recently, they were chairs of committees in the House. And now they are no longer, and that's thanks to the November election. But in terms of cost, there is a heavy cost already. I mean, I'm on the Agriculture Committee as well. I crisscross my district every year meeting with farmers. Local farmers know that climate change is real. They see these extreme weather patterns, extreme droughts, heavy rains, You know, late frost. You know, I was in Puerto Rico in July looking at the hurricane damage. I mean, people there understand that climate change is real, the intensity of these storms. We have wars that are now being waged over lack of water because of the impact of climate change. So this is real, and we are paying for it. And in terms of what we invest in green technology, the question is this: you're already investing a lot of your taxpayer dollars in the fossil fuel industry. You're already doing that. I mean, we price subsidies to big oil companies, believe it or not. It's ridiculous. The question is, are you going to continue to do that, or are you going to take that money and put it to a green, clean, renewable energy? And we want it to go to a green, clean, renewable energy.
Yeah, and by the way, Jim is so right. They want to call this socialistic, but 110 years of subsidies for the oil industry, that's capitalism. Giveaway of tax dollars. All of a sudden, you want to do the same thing for wind and solar and batteries and electric vehicles, and it's socialism. Well, why don't they just give back all their tax breaks? Why don't they give them back to the American taxpayer? That's not going to happen. Koch brothers aren't giving up their tax breaks for oil and gas. So let's come over here.
Jackie Balance from Florence. You spoke earlier about the hard work that lies ahead in the Green New Deal, working out the details, fleshing out the principles into practical legislative proposals. In the meantime, I don't think it's going to pass in the Senate, and I don't know what's happening in the House. I think Pelosi's an obstacle. I heard a rumor that if it didn't pass, if the resolution didn't pass, that there is a possibility of an extra legislative committee that might form to move ahead.
So,
speak to that.
As chairman of the Rules Committee, one of my jobs was to write the House rules for this session. And one of the things we wrote into the House rules was a special select committee on the climate crisis, which is, it's organized. And when we were last in the majority, Ed was the chair of it. We have it back. So that group of members is going to focus like a laser beam on trying to find solutions, as well as the committees of jurisdiction, the Energy and Commerce Committee, and Ways and Means all have responsibilities here. Look, our caucus right now, our Democratic caucus in the House, they get it. And I think, and Pelosi we would not have been able to get that special select committee if she wasn't part of it. I guess there was some controversy over the fact that she referred to the Green New Deal as the Green New Dream. And the bottom line was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says it is a dream. I mean, this is what we want. This is a big, wonderful dream. We want to protect this planet. We want to be good stewards of this planet. We want clean, green, renewable energy. We want to get away from fossil fuels. We want to create millions of new jobs. I mean, we want to do what's right by our kids and future generations. So, I mean, this is something that I think there's great enthusiasm about. Ed talked about what's happening in Iowa right now and all across the country. People get this. And by the way, it's not just kind of the so-called the intellectuals and the people who talk about big things. I mean, I said farmers get it. I mean, young people get it. We've been recognizing young people here who've been leading the charge. The gentleman who asked the first question talked about Vietnam and how that affected a generation. This climate change is this generation's Vietnam. And young people are stepping up and they're demanding that we do something.
Exactly. And, if Trump wins a second term, it could be a death sentence for the planet. So we don't have a choice. Failure is not an option. And Nancy Pelosi created, as Jim said, the Select Committee on Climate Change and made me the chairman in 2007. She made it her top issue. And what we were able to do in 2007, she and I, we increased fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive in America for the first time since 1975. That's how committed she was. Then in 2009, in the stimulus package that we had to pass because we were in a deep recession, we added $90 billion for wind and solar and battery and electric vehicle technology, $90 billion. And then we actually passed the Waxman-Markey bill, which I was with Henry Waxman, the co-author, which reduced greenhouse gases by 80% by the year 2050. It passed in the House, 219, 212, and then Mitch McConnell killed it in the Senate. But now we're back bigger and stronger. We have a movement that is behind us. And Nancy Pelosi has always made this a top issue. And in all the committees, as Jim is saying, in the House, you're going to see action before the end of this year. So let's come back over here.
Okay. Hi, my name is Richard Fine. I am the only one in the room who is not a fan of Senator Markey, but I am a big supporter of fighting climate change. I already sent you 10 questions by email, and you responded in a nice long letter, so I want to thank you. That was very good. I still don't agree with you.
Can you move in the microphone a little bit closer?
I'm sorry. Okay. Just to explain, the 10 questions I sent you will be published in the Daily Hampshire Gazette tomorrow on the editorial page. So I'm just going to ask you a short one because the social aspects of this troubled me, and I didn't understand your answer from your letter, okay? It says, I'm quoting from the resolution, ensuring the use of democratic participatory process that are inclusive of and led by frontline and vulnerable communities and workers to plan, implement, and administer the Green New Deal mobilization at the local level. So I want to know who are the frontline communities, who counts as a worker, and I'd also like to know, usually when we have an election, all right, you choose from the population at large and not from select identity groups. Why have you chosen that latter approach for the leaders, and that was your word, lead, right? Okay, the local level of fighting against climate change. Thank you.
As you know, during the first New Deal, you know, the Dixiecrats, they were Democrats. They didn't really like the idea of giving full Social Security benefits to the black sharecroppers. We can go through the whole litany of our own history. We know what it is, including where the most polluting facilities were always planted in the weakest, most vulnerable communities because they had the least political power. The point of that language is just to make sure that they're included in the decisions this round. As we're going to the 21st century, we have our own history. I grew up in Malden, total blue-collar community. The Malden River was purple when I was growing up. My mother said, don't swim in the Malden River. But all the chemical companies, the coal companies, they were all along the Malden River 4 blocks from my house, in a blue-collar community. Suburban communities didn't have rivers that were purple, if you know what I mean. And that's really the point of that language. It's just to make sure that this time we do it right for everyone in our society. And that's what this entire battle is about. Jimmy.
Yeah, no, let me just say, you know, I visited Flint, Michigan twice, and you know, listen. We had a town hall similar to this where I was in Flint, Michigan, and what you heard over and over from people were, you know, we knew that there was something wrong with our water for a long, long time, but nobody cared and nobody listened, and as a result, our kids have been poisoned. There are too many Flint, Michigans in the United States of America today. And what this is all about is saying that everybody matters, not just the wealthy, not just millionaires or billionaires, and by the way, not just people with big PACs and who have deep pockets to be able to give to politicians, but every community, especially those communities that have been neglected and that have been exploited because they are poor or because they're communities of color. I mean, and that is a reality in this country. And this seeks to address that inequity and to fix it.
Hi, thanks very much. My name is Kate Sims. I'm from Amherst, and I'm actually an environmental economist, and so I'm a big fan of the Waxman-Markey bill. I've been teaching about it for the past 10 years. Wow. But I'm super excited to have something new to teach about after 10 years of trying to give hope and hold on that there will be something new.
I said it would create jobs.
And I guess my question is, are there ideas from the Waxman-Markey bill that might carry over to the new bill? Particularly, my concern is, how will this Green New Deal limit fossil fuels in a real collective way? And can we use some of the old ideas about auctioning off permits for fossil fuel use to raise revenue or to return dividends to the people?
Thank you. And it's a very good question. And that was a 1,400-page bill. And it took 2 years to construct. The point of the Green New Deal is this. It's only 12 pages long. It's a set of principles, but not individual prescriptions. It's meant to trigger a national debate, which it already has, on all of the individual prescriptions which we might use, and Jim already made reference to it in every committee. Now, in Congress, in Ways and Means, it might be wind tax breaks, solar tax breaks. It might be tax breaks for electric vehicles. It might be tax breaks for storage technology. In the Natural Resources Committee, it might be how we can harness the public lands and public oceans of our country in order to deploy renewables. In the Banking Committee, it might be we can have a solar bank or an energy efficiency bank. So what's happening already across the House, especially, the Senate's a different case, as Mitch McConnell controls it very tightly. We're already seeing hearings, discussions about individual proposals. And it was 10 years ago, and time has moved on, and we've learned a lot. And some of the individual ideas will still obviously be relevant, including a national renewable electricity standard. In all 50 states, we have it in 30 states right now. We need a national renewable electricity standard so that every state has a responsibility to deploy electricity. In that legislation, we mandated that all buildings had to be twice as efficient. All new buildings had to be twice as efficient within 8 years as they're finishing construction. We could look at those building standards and see what we could do to mandate that, because if you make the air conditioning or the building twice as efficient, then you cut in half the number of natural gas plants you ever have to build in the first place. You can shut down coal-burning plants if you make all those buildings needing half the electricity which they needed. So a lot of the ideas are very relevant. We would have to bring them out, examine them, pick the right numbers. It's not going to be 15% or 20% anymore. We'd have to select 30, 40, 50, 60% as the goal for national electricity standard from clean and non-polluting sources. But a lot of it is still relevant, but we've already demonstrated over the last 10 years by the creation of 350,000 jobs, by the deployment of 65,000 megawatts of solar, 98,000 megawatts of wind, that this is real, it's economical, and we are seeing the marketplace respond to it. So that would be my answer, but thank you so much. Yep.
Hello, my name is Phil Corman, and I live in Bay State Village. And I work with farmers every day. And I guess what I want to just share is in the last 40 years, we know that agriculture in this country has gone in the wrong direction. We've managed to lower prices for so many goods, including agriculture. And sadly enough, we also have people making less money, so they need to buy those goods at such a lower price. We also know that almost 90% of the egg producers, the pig producers, the dairy producers have gone out of business as agriculture has gotten bigger and had less owners and been corporate. And at this point, we now call our top crops commodity crops because they can stay on the shelves even if we don't want to buy them, and we can hold them in storage. And things like fruits and vegetables are called specialty crops. And yet we live in an area here where, from where we're standing 30 miles in any direction, we have about 250 farms that are providing 15% of the food on our plates. So I'm wondering, in this pretty complicated, corporate, corrupted agricultural system, how, when we make changes where the power doesn't lie with a small family farm, are we going to be able to make sure that our family farms come out the other side with the technology and assistance and resources they need to stay in business to feed the rest of us?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, and I think this is not only in regard to agriculture, but to a lot of the other questions that were asked here today, we need to get the big money out of politics, number one. We need to reform the way we fund campaigns. The House passed a bill, H.R. 1, that I think is a step in the right direction. But so much of our policy, including our agricultural policy, is being shaped by big money. You know, where all the big money lies. Now, having said that, you know, if you look at how the farm bills are changing, you know, more appreciation for organic farming. I mean, they call fruits and vegetables specialty crops, but you know, there was a time when they weren't even acknowledged. And so we're starting to move in that direction. We need to move much faster. There's no doubt about that. But the other thing we need to do is to understand we need to learn from our local farmers that are farming the right way, that are actually taking care of the land in a way that is respectful of our environment. You know, farmers that are organic farmers or that utilize crop rotation or cover crops or, you know, are engaged in agroforestry and, you know, and do animal farming in a better way. We need to be able to, and one of the things that we hope to have happen in the course of all these committee discussions on the Green New Deal is that best practices in agriculture, among other things, are going to be brought forward, and we're going to say this is how you can do it. You know, this is how you could do it, and you could be profitable. And by the way, if we need to rearrange some of the subsidy structure, we ought to be willing to do that. And I think the one thing I would just say, and this is, you know, and this is what the critics are doing right now, is they're trying to get everybody all riled up and to get them to be afraid of that this is going to be some massive, you know, radical, punitive thing that's going to happen like overnight. The bottom line is that it's not. I mean, this Green New Deal is about opportunity. It's about opportunity for our farmers. It's about opportunity for our workers. And by the way, if we farm better and if we learn from some of the farmers in this area in particular, it's better for all of us because the food that we eat is going to be better. So I think that, you know, you're already seeing the beginnings of some new thinking on agriculture. But I'm hoping that this discussion is going to move us faster.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, sir. Yep, next question, right over here.
Hi, I'm Dan Kinsey from Haydenville. Can you hear me? One of the things about the Green New Deal is about, I think, about the 70% at least tax on the wealthy, which I would call the parasitic class, and that all the wealth is really done by the actual workers. One of the disenchantments that we have with government is that it's of the 1% and by the 1% instead of by the people. And so what the blowback is saying, well, where's the money? And if you can say, well, the money is with the rich people. They took it from us, so go get it, you know, from that tax. So that scarcity model is a BS thing, and for us to always hit back on that. And the other thing is, you know, for us to say when big money is in politics, Bernie Sanders showed last election that you can have enough money and win, or basically win, without corporate money. And like our congressman here, Neil, who he has 99.9% corporate money. I just looked up on the web. Almost no support from people's money. So I think it's very important for the Democrats to pull off of Wall Street, because the original New Deal was to save capitalism into this country, and capitalism sunk this country into the Depression. This New Deal is to save the planet. And I think that it's important to know that it's bigger than just weaning ourselves from big oil, but we have to wean ourselves from war, because the Pentagon is the biggest user of CO2. We can't have war for a global climate change reason. And the other thing is, capitalism cannot solve this problem, and this is one of the reasons they cannot look at it. And so it's that big. So I just wanted to say that.
We thank you, and you are exactly right. Franklin Delano Roosevelt saved capitalism from itself, and the way he did it was saying, we're going to pass Social Security. We're going to have a securities exchange, which he just implemented all these programs because unfettered capitalism actually winds up immoral. And so what we need is capitalism with a conscience, right? That's what we do here in Massachusetts. And what we want to do is ultimately take tax breaks that we give to oil companies and gas companies and give them to wind companies and solar companies and other companies and say, go out into the marketplace and win and create jobs in the private sector that will be a competing economic political force. In Iowa right now, 40% of all electricity is wind. You hear that? 40% of all electricity in Iowa is wind. So try getting on the wrong side of that. Try giving a speech out in Iowa any longer about renewable electricity when it's the farmers who are beneficiaries and we have empowered them economically. So Jim and I, just 2 years ago, we witnessed Donald Trump engaging in an immoral act, having a $1.5 trillion tax break for the wealthiest people in our country in the largest corporations, of which 80% has just been used for stock buybacks for their own corporations. So we agree with you. When we hear from these right-wingers that we can't afford to do it, they don't say that about these wars. They don't say this about all the tax breaks that we give. They don't say it about all the uneconomical subsidies that they want to build into the tax code or into the appropriations process. And all we're saying is, give us an equal shot. Give us a shot with something that will create millions of jobs and save the planet in the bargain. And so that's why they're going to lose this debate, because they are supporters of socialism on stilts, but it's just backing the biggest, most powerful, richest forces already in our society against the 99% who are ready to revolt. And I think that's really your larger point, and I agree with it 100%. Yeah, Jim.
No, and I would simply say to you, I agree with much of what you said, but I will say I am the congressman from here, and I don't take corporate PAC money. And I agree. I mean, we have been fighting against this overbloated military budget ever since I got to Congress, and I know Ed has been doing it for a long, long time. Interestingly enough, the Joint Chiefs of Staff have basically highlighted the climate crisis as being one of the major national security threats that we face. And they've come to that conclusion, I think, because a lot of the conflict and civil unrest around the world is directly tied to the climate crisis. Lack of water, lack of of fertile soil, lack of food. It's all interrelated. That's where you have civil unrest. That's where wars begin. And so even the Joint Chiefs understand that. But I would rather be investing in cleaner, greener technologies or ways to help people transform to better farming techniques all around the world than investing in more nuclear weapons or modernizing our nuclear weapons. We don't need any more nuclear weapons. We got to be talking about abolishing nuclear weapons.
And by the way, Richie Neal will pass out the tax breaks for wind and solar and batteries and all electric vehicles. That is coming out of Richie Neal's Ways and Means Committee over to Mitch McConnell. There's a message coming out of the Ways and Means Committee led by Richie Neal on those issues. So I just want that to be very clear as well. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sherry Morgan, and I live in Deerfield. And I'm happy that both of you are here to speak to us tonight, and I'm very, very pleased to see many of our legislators here. To add to your introductory remarks, I want to let you know that 81 of our Massachusetts state legislators signed a New Year's resolution committing to act and implement ways to deal with climate change. So I hope you folks in the front row are paying attention, because there are many of us who are going to hold your feet to the fire on that. Trust me, we're working on it. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We have this bright, shiny Green New Deal in front of us, and you are going to be hearing lots of comments about adaptation versus mitigation. And we have to be very, very clear. Adaptation is about, maybe we can build seawalls or raise roadways and bridges to get out of the increased flooding. But the mitigation part is fixing the problem. The mitigation part is reducing CO2 going into the atmosphere. The CO2 is looking for ways to absorb more CO2 out of the atmosphere. That is absolutely critical. We must do that. And what concerns me, we don't have much time. You know, you're looking at the Green New Deal, and that's 2021 and out. In Massachusetts, we have a transportation climate initiative. We're working with 7 or 8 other states. That's at least 2021 and out. And the point I want to make to you and you folks sitting here on the front row, we have carbon pricing bills in the legislature at the federal level, and we have a carbon pricing bill that got 95 co-sponsors in the legislature in Massachusetts. And I understand the problem we have at the federal level. The Democrats have to get more power. We got to fix the Senate. But I also will say that Massachusetts has led on many, many occasions, and I am challenging these folks and everybody in the room. Massachusetts needs to step up this year and make sure that we start working on the problem. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say, the leaders are sitting in the front row here. There's no question in my mind that there's no other group in the whole country that could be put together that are more committed to working on this issue than the people who are sitting in this front row. And you are right, it is Massachusetts. We went first on gay marriage. We went first on the Affordable Care Act. We've been going first since 1775. That's who we are. The revolutionaries are out here. When I was a boy, my father worked for the Hood Milk Company. I was lying on the rug looking at President Kennedy on television. And of course, he couldn't be president because he was Irish and Catholic and from Massachusetts. And there I was Irish and Catholic and from Massachusetts. And now they've elected this person. And so I was always fascinated by what he said, but yet we were threatened by Sputnik. We were threatened by Yuri Gagarin. We were threatened by all these technological breakthroughs which the Soviets had made, and they were threatening to take over outer space. And the president went to Rice University, and he challenged our country to send a mission to the moon and return it within 10 years. And he said in that speech, we will have to invent new metals. We will have to invent new alloys. We will have to invent new propulsion systems, and we will have to bring that mission back from the moon safely through heat, half the intensity of the sun, and we must do so safely, and we must do it in 10 years. And our country accepted that challenge. And the president said, we are going to do it not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Donald Trump is JFK in reverse. He says we cannot do it. We cannot be this innovative country any longer. We cannot solve this problem. But in fact, the opposite is true. We know that we can do this. We know that young people are ready to rise up and invent these new materials, to deploy these new technologies all across our country. We know that the unions and the blue-collar workers are ready to go out and to do this job in the same way. In the 1930s, it took us 10 years to get out of that depression. In the same way it took us 10 years to put a mission on the moon. In 10 years, we can have a transformational energy revolution in this country, and young people in our country know it is true. And that's why this issue is now so supercharged, because they don't want to have this problem handed to them intergenerationally, not having been solved, and they want all of us intergenerationally to now partner in the same way that there's an intergenerational MAGA movement out there. We must partner intergenerationally with the young people in order to make sure that this job is completed. And President Kennedy was right. We do so because we are bold, because we know that the rest of the world is going to depend upon us to accomplish this goal. And the people sitting here in this front row, and the people who are working with Jim over in the House of Representatives, they are ready to do the job, and we need you to have a high energy level electorally as well heading into 2020, so that we have the political momentum that is created so that we can accomplish this job.
And I just say that, you know, we have a great group of legislators and leaders here who represent us here in the state. But, you know, when Ed began his talk, he said the Bay State stands for the brain state. We have some of the best colleges and universities in the world in Massachusetts. And we need to utilize them better in not only coming up with solutions for the country, but solutions for the state. You know, we had a big battle here over this pipeline, which I thought was a bad idea, and I think you did too. And we fought against it, right? We all fought against the pipeline, and we won, all right? But here's the deal. So that's the first part of the battle. The second part of the battle is we need to have an energy policy for Massachusetts. I mean, that is specific. You know, when people say to me, oh, we can't rely only on solar. Well, no one's saying that that's the only thing we're going to rely on, but the bottom line is how much more solar can we do in the state? You know, and so wind can't solve everything. Well, maybe it can't solve everything, but it could solve a lot more than it's doing now. So we need the brain power of the state, you know, to help provide the political leadership with the details, you know, on how we move forward. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an energy expert. You know, and I rely on scientists, and I rely on academics, and I rely on those who know what they're talking about to give me guidance. But we can lead the country if we can get it right here in Massachusetts. But the answers are going to come, I think, from the brain power that we have, and we will, you know, we'll fight to implement it. But we need you, and we need our colleges and universities to be on the forefront of this.
Hi, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. First thing I want to say is that we are on occupied Pecumtuck territory, and I think it's very important that we acknowledge that. My name is Anthony Rogers Wright. I was a resident of Worcester, Massachusetts, where I attended undergraduate and graduate school at one of those great universities you were just talking about. And I'm Jewish, and I just happen to be in town for the weekend, so it's just a Basheret moment that you're here, because I've had some things that I've wanted to ask you. So I have 3 questions. There's frontline communities and the organizations that represent them, including the Climate Justice Alliance and the Indigenous Environmental Network, have had some concerns with the resolution because of its vagueness. So to that end, my first question is, will the policy commit to including a mention of a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure and fossil fuel usage, and as well as a commitment to no false solutions like cap and trade, carbon markets, geoengineering, which are harmful to frontline communities? Secondly, the resolution states to promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppressions of indigenous people, communities of color, etc. My question is, does this mean reparations? And if not, can a bill committed to environmental justice and climate justice not include reparations for black folk for slavery, white supremacy, fueled and concentrated oppression, as well as restitution to indigenous folk for genocide, brutal land theft, and broken treaties? Finally, I know this is the first Green New Deal town hall that you've held. The makeup of this city is 87.7% white, 2.7% African American, 0.3% Native American, and 6.8% Latinx. Shouldn't the communities hit first and worst have the first opportunity to offer input? And what will you do to ensure that this process moving forward is consistent with the 1996 James Principles for Democratic Organizing and the 1991 Principles of Environmental Justice? Because yes, Bernie Sanders performed exceptionally without corporate money, but we also learned from his campaign that you cannot win without the black and brown vote, and this Green New Deal process must ensure that they've learned those lessons. Thank you.
Okay, good. So thank you for the question, and that's why I called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the first week of December to say we should sit down, try to find a way of ensuring that this is an intergenerational compact, but also that when we do it in the 21st century, it includes everyone, that no one's left out. And so that's, in my opinion, that's kind of the magic of the Green New Deal. It is an intergenerational compact. It's meant to include everyone. It's meant to leave no one behind. It's meant to ensure that every race, every economic strata is fully represented in this discussion, that we leave no one behind, and it is environmental justice. The actual resolution itself, it doesn't mention cap and trade. It doesn't mention a carbon tax. It doesn't mention any individual item. It's meant to open up a big debate in our country. How can we accomplish this? What are the avenues that we can use in order to solve this problem? And that debate is intended to ask everyone to bring forward with their ideas into the legislative process, into the State House, into city governments. What can happen? What's the smartest policies that we can adopt? That's the whole point of it. That's why it's not 1,400 pages long and only 12 pages long. It's now, as Jim said, to fill it in. What are the details? And so, but it is meant, I will say this, and that's why those words are in there. It is meant to be fully inclusive of everyone in our society, not just an elite making decisions that affect everyone for an entire century, but to do it right this time. Do it in a way that does ensure that marginalized communities, that frontline communities are all in the room from day one, and they will be. They will be, okay? Because you can just feel the energy that is now being created in this country to ensure that their voices are being heard. But thank you, sir. Thank you for coming up here, and thank you for speaking.
And I would just echo what Senator Markey just said. I mean, the goal here, the intention, is to speak to everybody and to make a special effort to go to communities that have been historically neglected and cut out of the process. And so this, this is not the one and only. This is going to be, one of a zillion of these meetings in Massachusetts alone. Yes. And one of the things I hope that people in this audience will help us with, is to help make sure that we go to these communities that have historically been discarded, that have been the communities where the environmental situation has been particularly harsh because they're communities either of low income or communities of color that have been people the political establishment has been indifferent to. So, I mean, we want to be judged at the end of this process as keeping our word in this bill. So we want to work with you and anybody in this audience. You have ideas? I also represent Worcester. We're going to go to Worcester. Worcester's a very different kind of, makeup than here. But the bottom line is we want to go everywhere. Big meetings, small meetings, meetings in our office or town hall meeting, whatever. But, I mean, this is a genuine attempt to get this right. I mean, to actually get a piece of legislation, move forward, to do something meaningful that it includes everybody, where nobody was cut out. And so we want to try to do that. We want you to help us to make sure that we can do that.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yes? Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. Who's next? Right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Senator Markey. My name is Patrick Quinlan. I'm from Hadley, and I am the CTO of a company called SolarBlock in East Hampton. And I met you 20 years ago as a science fellow in Congress working for the science committee, George Brown. I live here now, and you inspired me as a scientist to continue this. And my company now is working on ways to enable solar on walls in all buildings in cities. And what we're trying to do is actually to help you do this. And we haven't received any federal funding, but right now we have 9 employees. We're mostly self-funded in a small mill in East Hampton. And I want to tell you that everyone that works for us is very dedicated. We know this is going to happen, and it's not impossible. Actually, most of the engineers, they're UMass kids that just came in as internships. It's really easy to them. This is not rocket science, and we can do this. So I just want to let the young people know that the scientists are not baffled by this. The engineers are not baffled by this. We just need your support to get this done. So thank you very much.
So can I ask, how many additional square feet should the mayor expect you to have to expand in East Hampton? What is your expectation? Huh?
Well, we're in the Eastworks building, and we're already talking to some people about expanding. My CEO is in New York tomorrow talking to people from Brazil. So we want to bring in foreign money into the state, and that's the right way to do it. We're actually going to make this happen. And the other countries in the world really know that they need to do this too. So with a lack of leadership here, there are always technical people that are to help make this work everywhere. So we're very optimistic. I don't want people to despair. We can do this. It's
do
really
it.
wonderful.
President Kennedy was right, and
Yes,
you're
he
right.
was. Thank you.
Tonight. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lois Gagnon from Belchertown, and I'm also a member of the Green Party. And as you probably know, we've had a Green New Deal as part of our platform for nearly a decade. It's fairly comprehensive, and I compared your Green New Deal to our Green New Deal this afternoon. And the most glaring thing that I saw that was missing from yours is it doesn't address the U.S. military's contribution to climate change. The U.S. military is the biggest user of fossil fuels and the biggest emitter of CO2. Our proposal is to cut military spending by 50%. And that may sound unrealistic, but if we're going to be serious about addressing this issue, I think it's the only realistic proposal that there is.
Okay, well, I thank you for raising the military issue because the hurricane that hit Florida and destroyed the Air Force Base down there, $8 billion. The hurricane that hit Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, $5 billion. The first witness who I had testify before the Select Committee on Climate Change in 2007 was General Gordon Sullivan, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army. And he was representing 13 3- and 4-star generals on this issue. And here was his opening testimony to the whole history of this Climate Change Committee. He said that he was the general in charge of making the decision to send in our military personnel into Mogadishu in Somalia in 1993. And when he sent them in, he had not really reflected upon what was the cause of that conflict. As he stepped back and now looked at it, what he realized was that a climate-related drought had created fewer and fewer resources within Somalia, and that the various tribes and gangs were now fighting over those more and more limited resources, and that when he sent in that mission, which came to be known as Black Hawk Down, he sent it in to a climate-related conflict. And he was there to speak for 13 retired 3- and 4-star admirals and generals to just say that ultimately this is going to become a massive national security issue for our country. And when those storms hit, they don't put that additional harm and cost to the federal budget on the defense budget. They put them over in something called the supplemental. They pretend like it really isn't a military expenditure. And so in many ways, it's the military themselves who are most concerned about what is happening. They're concerned about the Norfolk Naval Base. If it got hit by Hurricane Sandy, it would have been incomparable damage. They're concerned about the Diego Garcia base that we have overseas. It could just be underwater in a very short period of time. They're afraid that they don't have renewable resources, solar, for example, that they could use in remote locations all around the world, that their biggest problem are supply lines of fossil fuels that have to be transported in. So in many ways, it is the military that are most knowledgeable about what the causes of many of these conflicts around the world. Syria, the Sudan, Somalia, climate, climate, climate. And so if we're going to be smart, and my mother always said, Eddie, try to work smarter, not harder. She would say that before she would say that she was going to donate my brain to Harvard Medical School as a completely unused human organ. But here, we're being warned that there is a military aspect of this that we have to deal with. And if we do so wisely, and Jim and I do believe that the military budget is too big, that it's bloated in many ways, and it has to be cut. But there's another aspect to it as well, which it's only going to grow and grow and grow, and the United States is going to be asked to be the force that has to come in then and deal with the consequences. Okay.
I'm with you on this, right? I mean, But I've been advocating for a long time that when we talk about national security, we need to broaden the definition, because it's about more than bombs and tanks and drones. I mean, what it's about, is the purity of our environment. It's about whether people have jobs, whether they have shelter, whether they have food. I mean, more people die on this planet from hunger than from war. And a lot of this is directly related to the topic we're talking about here today. And so we need to get people comfortable when, when you talk about national security, we're just not talking about more military money and more military hardware, that we ought to be investing in some of the solutions that actually can help create a more stable world where we don't have so many people starving to death and so many people fighting over water and over land and I mean, so, but I appreciate your comments.
Hi, my name's Emily Wookie, and I'm a student at Smith College, and I'm originally from Texas. And first, I'd just like to quickly comment that I'm honored to be speaking in front of you two, because normally I have to deal with men like Ted Cruz. And aside from being someone who's affected by climate change, as is everyone, I'm currently taking a class titled The Sociology of Climate Change. So, yes. So I'm significantly more invested in the issue of climate change than I was, let's say, a few years ago. I have learned that capitalism has failed us. It is an unsustainable system that feeds off the degradation of the earth, and subsequently has created a neoliberal power vacuum that allows corporations such as ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, etc., to take control not only of our economy, but of our politics. I have read the Green New Deal. I actually have it in my hand right here, printed and annotated. And it is clear to me that the most efficient thing to do is obviously reinvest the power that goes into fossil fuel companies into renewable energy fields. And I'm totally with that. That makes sense to me. But I want to know what this piece of legislation will do to make sure these corporations will never have this kind of political power and influence again. Because it does not matter if the Green New Deal works, if big business takes unruly control over societal institutions once again. I do not believe in green capitalism. It may be a step in a new direction, but I hope for a new system, because capitalism is capitalism is capitalism. It has screwed over minorities, it has screwed over women, especially indigenous people. It has fostered racism, xenophobia, white nationalism, and hatred. And if it has to be bailed out once again, it will need to be bailed out again. Doesn't matter if it's green or not. So my question to you is, how will our political institutions be transformed as well?
Well, we're transforming it right here. The Green New Deal is about participatory democracy. It's about taking back our country from the special interests. It's about creating a national, political, sharp-edged movement that will send a powerful signal to politicians and corporations across this country. So it all comes from the grassroots, okay? That's the power in our country. And it's now, for the first time, being transformed into something that is a political force on climate change. And that message is not being lost on the fossil fuel companies. Why is this so important? Because the oil companies have convinced Donald Trump to roll back the fuel economy standards that I was the author of, along with Nancy Pelosi and Obama. It was going to be 54.5 miles per gallon. That backs out 3 million barrels of oil a day. ExxonMobil doesn't like that. The Koch brothers don't like that. And that would just be 54.5 miles per gallon, because then we're going to 64 and 74 and 84, and then all electric vehicles that use no oil at all. That is an existential threat to ExxonMobil. That's what they're afraid of. That's why they're fighting so hard, because that will flip the entire political system in our country. That's why failure is not an option for the Green New Deal. We have to collapse the power of an industry that can disseminate lies about climate change for a generation, that can go to an administration and say, roll back the fuel economy standards. Don't renew the wind and solar and all-electric vehicle tax breaks. That's why this battle is so important. Democracy is on the line. Science is on the line. And so we have to make sure that in 2020 that we're up in voting. There was huge turnout in 2018 that did not show up in 2014. And 2016, we need much higher turnout. We need people to go out and vote on these issues. And the reason? Because there's going to be an unlimited amount of money coming in from the other side, from these fossil fuel companies. And they're going to be disseminating lies about climate change. So the transformation of the political system, it begins in 2020. Donald Trump has to be gone. We have to control the United States Senate. We have to make sure that 2 more Supreme Court justices don't get confirmed by Donald Trump, who will legalize unlimited, undisclosed money for eternity into our political system. The control of the political system is at stake in 2020. So we need you in. We need you to be participating at the highest levels of your lives. That begins the beginning of the destruction of the power of the fossil fuel industry in our political system. It is by far the most pervasive and powerful force. It spends the most money. It has the disproportionate influence. It gets the policy results that it wants in the Trump years. The good news is we can win, but it's going to require people, as it did during the abolitionist movement, during the suffragette movement, during the gay marriage movement, during the Affordable Care movement, to get up and to move and to act. And then we can make this system work once again. Because right now, it's not working. It's not working. The NRA controls the Republican Party. Jim, and he was eloquent on the floor of the House on background checks for the purchase of guns. The first thing Mitch McConnell announced was there will be no vote in the Senate. And why? Because of the NRA. And so our job has to be to make the NRA stand for not relevant anymore in American politics. But we need you. We need you to act. We need to take the fossil fuel power and just begin to collapse it and have the voices of the vast majority of people in our country to participate. But it requires evidence of political action in 2020. No one can sit on the sidelines. No one can sit it out. If we sit it out and Trump gets 4 more years, then the concentration of power in the hands of the few is going to be so severe a problem that it will take a generation to unfold it. So we have to act, we have to defeat him, and we have to take back the Senate so we can begin to make real progress on the legislation that needs to pass. Yes, sir. Oh, you want to go, Jim?
No, I want to thank you for your thoughtful question. I think I want to sit in on your class. It sounds like an interesting class. But I think one of the things we have to grapple with here is kind of the political reality across the country, which is that the other side has been very successful in convincing people to vote against their self-interest and to believe that when you talk about dealing with the climate crisis, that somehow it's going to be punitive. It's going to hurt them. They're going to have to sacrifice, when in fact the opposite is the true. We'll get a better planet, there'll be more opportunities. And we have to figure out a way how we talk about these things in a way that will convince people in your home state of Texas who vote for Ted Cruz that he's wrong and you're right. And so, how we frame this issue, especially in these swing areas, where quite frankly, we're going to need to pick up more seats in Texas. And we're going to need to pick up seats in states that have voted Republican and voted in ways that I think we could argue that are against the self-interest of their own people. But we have to come up with the language that they will feel comfortable with being able to address these issues and get on board with us. And I think that's a challenge here. So I think the system is not working. I would argue one of the biggest reasons it's not working is because of the lack of oversight, the lack of regulation, and that is all because of the influx of big corporate money into our political system. They've bought politicians, they've bought this White House, all the people that are in positions that would oversee environmental matters are all from the fossil fuel industry because they're all getting paid off. And so at some point we're going to have to grapple with this issue of money and politics because I think that's the root of so many of our problems. But I look forward to coming to your class.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And we're just going to finish with these questions right here, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay? So please, we'll try to answer very succinctly.
I'll be quick. My name is Tim Wallace. I'm from Northampton, and I want to thank you both for your leadership on this really, really important issue, and also on many other issues, including the nuclear weapons issue. And I just want to I've spent most of my life in the UK, and one of the things that was done in the UK is this report called Arms to Renewable, which looks not just at the trillions of dollars that are going into things like nuclear weapons, but also the brain power, the science, the engineering, the skills, the infrastructure, the industrial framework and so on that we need to put into these green technologies and renewable energy. And so I hope that you will take that into consideration and include something about that.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for bringing in the science in the same way the business leader from East Hampton. Okay, we can do this. The science and technology breakthroughs are just massive. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this is a subject that's been covered before, but I think it's just about the most serious issue. As I'm concerned, because a lot of the critics say we don't have the money for a Green New Deal, but we can't afford it. Yet we have the biggest socialist institution in the world, the most wasteful and destructive, and that's our military. And we just lavish trillions and trillions of dollars on that could be going into a Green New Deal. And that's like more than 60% of our tax dollars. And, you know, it's like a black hole, totally unaccountable for. Neither party will deal with the fact that they're totally unaccountable. They can't even pass an audit. 20 trillion are just totally missing? You know, just think if that money went into a Green New Deal. You know, why can't we use the technology of corporations like Raytheon and United Technologies to solve these problems? You know, why are we, you know, we feel like, oh my God, if we cut the military, there's going to be jobs. What's going to happen to the jobs? You know, well, use these companies to make high-speed trains and solar energy, windmills. And, you know, the soldiers, all these people, these soldiers that we have, why can't they be used to build our infrastructure, both green and otherwise? Mm-hmm. And why are we, you know, we could end the immigration problem by, you know, if we stop ending the destruction on all these other countries like Iraq and Venezuela and Honduras, all these countries where the immigrants are flooding in here because we've overthrown their governments and destabilized them, and mostly so we can get their oil and other natural resources for our out-of-control corporate empire. So, you know, we can help them. We can be a true Department of Defense by going out and helping these people. You know, you talk about Somalia and all the conflicts there. Well, why the heck are we going there to intervene in their conflicts? Why aren't we helping them? Why aren't we helping them deal with their climate issues? So, and Maduro, we could learn so much from Maduro, Nicolas Maduro. He's gone and taken the oil money of Venezuela, and he's used it to end homelessness, and he's used it for Medicare for all and to help his people, and instead we're attacking him and trying to put another horrible oligarch that's just going to do nothing but walk all over their people and put them into grinding poverty. So that's what we need to be doing.
No, thank you. You've given us...
No geoengineering or 5G. I heard that's part of the Green New Deal. We don't...
It's not in the Green New Deal. That's not in the Green New Deal. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, my name is Daniel from Greenfield, and definitely thank you both for being here. Thank you for everyone being here. I was just at Al Gore's training on climate change down in Atlanta, and 2.5 hours of slides of extreme weather events literally brought me to tears. At Martin Luther King's church, there was a rabbi saying that our home is on fire and that we are the arsonists. And it's interesting to me, and I think this is a way to talk to people that might watch Fox News, is to show them that the root word for economy and the root word for ecology is the same, and it translates to house or home, that we really do need solutions that are economically and environmentally intelligent. It dawned on me that many of us have a one-sided relationship with nature, that we get a lot more from nature than what a lot of us give back. And if you've ever had an ex-girlfriend or an ex-boyfriend, they're probably an ex for a reason. But so why do we think, because we know that one-sided relationships don't work in our own personal life, so why do we think that it can continue to work with this planet for the next 100, 1,000 years? A specific solution I would encourage you to look at, they said that with the Reagan tax cut, it would have employed more people, but people tended to invest in capital-intensive industries. So what if we would need to increase the capital gains rate, but what if we had a targeted tax cut for 30 years where we cut the capital gains rate by, say, 30% when people invested in environmentally responsible, labor-intensive industries? And just in relation to environmental justice, I would encourage you to look to the work of Bishop William Barber II, leading the Poor People's Campaign. He's very eloquent, and it looks like he and Al Gore are really going forward together on this. But yeah, there's so much to do, but we really need to do it. And as a coworker of mine said, that he was a retired Marine, and he said in the Marines we like to have overwhelming force. And he said the beauty of overwhelming force is that it's overwhelming. And that if we don't have overwhelming force to win the day on this, that we're going to lose. So I would just really encourage you to make it all happen.
Jim.
And we'll work with you.
We're with you. Great comments. Thank you. Yes?
My name's Dave Gottsagen. I'm from Belchertown, but I spent most of my life, the last 30 years, in Holyoke. I'm a pediatrician there, a member of Climate Action now, and proud owner of solar panels, which 10 years ago, on our east-facing roof we weren't able to get because the technology wasn't available. Now we have it. We're real happy. Two questions. One, of course, with my profession, I'm very interested in how you can get the word out about the health-related effects of climate change and why we need the new...
The what-related effects?
The health-related effects.
Okay.
And also, here you're speaking to sort of a committed audience who's on your side, but every day in the media for the last decades we're hearing about these climate disasters, and you always hear about the plucky person in the rowboat plucking their family off the roof, but they're going to rebuild their house for the third time and come back, and they'll build their house on stilts and be able to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. Of course, only zillionaires can do that. But how can we get the media to cover stories of these disasters, even like NPR, for example, where right at the time of these disasters, right there, they're talking about what caused them, and that's climate change. And I think that's really the only way that we're going to convince the country it's a problem.
Jim.
Well, one is I think you're right. I mean, I think in being effective communicators are why we need a Green New Deal. I mean, we need to bring it home to people. I mean, and there are health impacts for our neglect of this planet. I mean, not only in terms of hunger and that I mentioned earlier, but in terms of increased cases of cancer. I can go right down the list, and I think we need to help make those connections better. And I think, look, I agree with you on, we need to get these stories out. But, we can't sit around and wait for the New York Times to do a front-page story on all these things all the time. Sometimes we all have social media. We all have our own constituencies. We need to get these things out, and we need to be able to, kind of drive the story ourselves if we can't get somebody to cover it in a newspaper. I mean, I think, part of it, we have to be willing to think out of the box and creatively, and find ways to be able to advance this, because we know one thing: we can't rely on the traditional modes of communication and the traditional politics. So, but I agree with you.
My wife joined the public health service right out of medical school, and she's a Korea public health service doctor. She retired actually as a 2-star admiral. She ran all women's health during the Clinton years. And here's an interesting thing that she taught me. It's that Japanese women contract breast cancer at 1/4 the rate of American women, but they contract it at the same rate as American women in the first generation after they come to our country. What does that mean? Is it something in our environment? Is it something that we do to ourselves? What is it that causes that to happen? And so, to the extent to which, like you're saying, there are health-related aspects of all this pollution, and at the same time, there is now a scientific consensus that has occurred around the science of climate change and the impact on the intensification of these storms and the fires that we're seeing as well. And pretty much every night now, there is a story on a storm or a flood or a hurricane or a tornado or a fire somewhere in the United States. It's now no longer another story. It's the story, the first, second, or third story almost every single night. And you are right. We now have to translate it into science education as well, into climate education. But I do think the political environment within which we're now working on the Green New Deal is educated by what people are seeing every single night, by what they watch in Nebraska, in Kansas, in Alabama, in Florida, in Texas, in state after state. I just think the numbers are moving because people now are making the connection scientifically. I thank you for your point. Yes, back over here, sir.
Mike Petishnak, Belchertown. I have a concern with the goal of...
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
I have a concern with the goal of our electric power system being 100% renewable in 10 years, and trying to make use of my 40-plus years of relevant experience in electric system operations. I tried to perform a CNN reality-type check on this goal. I've written a paper called The Challenges in Replacing Fossil Fuel Electric Generation with Climate-Friendly Resources. It's been informally peer-reviewed with people with about 200 years of electric utility experience. I gladly provide it to you or anyone else who will. Okay. My first problem is definitional. Renewable energy is commonly used, includes wood burning, trash burning, and biomass. But they share the same problems with fossil fuels, heat production being inherent part of their generation process, and they also release greenhouse gases. To solve the problem,
Can you just speak up a little bit more, please?
To solve the problem, I recommend replacing the word renewable with climate-friendly generation, which basically includes wind, solar, and hydro. In 2017, New England had about 5% of its energy come from wood and trash burning. My second problem is the 10-year period of implementation. And there's a lot of industry forecasts that go way, way differently than 10 years. For example, the United States Energy Information Administration forecasts 27% renewable by 2040 and 31% renewable by 2050. 10 years may be aspirational, and I may be wrong, but does not seem realistic. Also, a 2017 Department of Energy Wind Technologies Market Report predicts that the rapid growth of wind energy will taper off in the future because the production tax credit is being phased out and gas prices are expected to remain low. My third problem is the 100% target. Wind and solar generation, as commonly implemented, are variable output resources that do not provide operating reserve, which is needed to cover various power system contingencies such as loss of generation and load forecasting errors. Maintaining sufficient quantities of the various types of operating reserve is essential to operating a reliable power system. Fossil fuel generation provides an overwhelming majority of the operating reserve, and their complete simple replacement with wind and solar not only removes the operating reserve, but the varying nature of wind and solar output increases the requirement for reserve.
Okay, so I thank you, sir, for that. And again, there's been a vast underestimation of how fast the renewable revolution is moving. We also want a transition, and we want it to be a just transition. But a lot of the estimates have completely understated how rapidly the price of these renewables has dropped and how utilities across the country are embracing them, how rapidly we've made this revolution take place in electric vehicles and in building materials as well. So our job is to kind of tell that story, to create a level playing field, and then let the winners and losers sort themselves out. But as long as our side gets the opportunities which they need, then we're going to be extremely successful. So thank you. Back over here, sir.
Yes, hi. My name is Joe Silverman. I'm from Florence, Mass. I'm a psychologist, and I've really worked on the psychology of climate communication. So I appreciate, Jim, you're talking about language as an important part of the solution here. It's great to see the Green New Deal bringing this conversation finally to the forefront, and people really seem to be a lot more aware of the issue. I have two concerns about it. One is whether or not we've really learned the lesson from Obamacare, which passed without any Republican votes, and there was this huge campaign by the right with lies and distortions, to paint it, to brand it in a way that really wasn't accurate, but still obviously resonated with enough of the population such that for at least 6 years in elections, voters were not in favor of it. So I think one question is whether or not, even if Democrats sweep the elections in 2020, is there going to be a way that we can avoid the resistance and obstruction that we saw with Obamacare? The other concern is that it seems like the conversation is very much about politics and government fixing the problem. My understanding of the science is that even if we move to renewables, which realistically is not going to happen overnight, we're already at levels that are unprecedented. And it seems like this sense of personal responsibility is not really being addressed. Here in this area, people drive Priuses and bike to work, but I just came back from South Florida, and it's really not on the radar in many parts of the country. So what can be done to, through language, through communication, restore a sense of personal responsibility for contributing to the problem and not leaving it for government or business to solve for us?
Jim, do you want to?
Yeah, no, I think you raised some important points. As one who was there during the entire debate on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, one of my frustrations was that I didn't think we did a very good job of selling it. In fact, when we passed it, then nobody talked about it, and we let the opposition define it. So I think there are lessons to be learned. But look, as I go back to what I said before, we ought to be talking about this in terms of opportunity, in terms of job creation, in terms of being good stewards of this planet. We ought to be talking about the benefits and not having to respond, oh, we're banning hamburgers, or no, this is a socialist plot, or this is whatever. And sometimes we get defensive, and I think our defensiveness sometimes makes it more difficult to persuade to get people to think that this is a good idea. And again, it's just not unique to the Green New Deal. I mean, anything that we have done, in terms of increasing regulation to protect people and to protect the environment has always come up against resistance, and people and the opposition always attack it as something that the sky's going to fall in. But I mean, language is important, and how we talk about it is important, and and I think we can't, and we have to understand that as we begin this debate, there is a lot of skepticism out there, and so how we. And again, I'm not an expert on wordsmith. Maybe we should talk about. You can give us good words to help soothe people as we talk about this. But but messaging is important on this. But this is about opportunity. I mean, this is about the New Deal. I mean, basically provided millions of jobs and opportunity for people during a difficult time. This is the new Green Deal. It's going to provide millions of jobs, good-paying jobs, and jobs in fields that are going to make this planet better. Any of that.
So thank you, sir. And where are we over here now? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, quickly, please. We're going to wrap up here in 3 more minutes. Yes, sir. Quickly.
I'll try to make this brief. I own an apartment building in Holyoke.
Sure. You're what?
I own an apartment building in Holyoke, wherein live largely lower-income Latinx people, your constituents. And right now, to heat that building during our cold winters, we're using oil. Really, really dirty oil. Not like the gasoline that you put in your gas tank. We've tried to switch to natural gas because it's way better for the planet and much cheaper, but we've been told that there's not enough capacity, and so we have to stick with the oil. That's both more expensive and way, way worse for the climate. So what I want to ask is, while we look for final end solutions where everything is solar, et cetera, what can we do in the meantime to take these common sense solutions that are not policy, that are practical steps we can take today that we want to take out of our own pocket that we're not allowed to because the capacity is not there? And I'll just add one more thing. Holyoke has, Mayor Morris will know this, the cheapest electricity in the state. It is almost entirely renewable. And so we looked into, and we already did, switched many of our apartments into electric. And what happened is the cost to our low-income, larger Latinx residents skyrocketed. And in my mind, to force these people to pay the cost of our climate crisis is unconscionable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for, and again, we have to make sure that it's just, it's equitable, and that it's smart. And so we should talk about what you think might make the most sense. And yes, sir, you have the last word, sir.
Hi, I'm Anthony Brogno, split my time between Belchertown and Petersham, Mass. And up in Petersham, I'm working with an organization where we work on environmental education. It's called the University of the Wild. And my question is, how do we educate people from, cradle to grave? How do we educate people on these issues? Where in the Green New Deal does education really fall into this? And especially alternative education, because what we're doing is teaching people how to be in closer relationship to the earth, how to be better stewards and have a better relationship with the natural world. So where does education fall into this? How does alternative education, because like we're seeing in the news right now, you've noticed probably a lot of these large universities, there's a lot of things going on with controversy and how, you've talked about big money in politics. Well, what about big money in education? And the perpetuation of these large universities, some of them here in this state. We've seen in the news lately the controversies and happenings with places like Harvard and people buying their kids in there. And so education is also perpetuating these issues that this Green New Deal is talking about. And how does education fall into this, and what specifically are organizations like us and other alternative sources of education and the existing education systems that are perpetuating poor relationship with the environment and the inequalities in wealth and access to that education? Where's the opportunity for organizations like us and alternative educational bodies in fixing the education system?
Well, so one is, I think education is already happening, which because I'm impressed. I mean, we have some young people here who have been really out front and leading this walkout around climate change at our public schools. I get more mail and more emails from young people. I mean, from the grammar school level through middle school through high school, who are really committed to this issue. I have dozens and dozens of students come by my office to talk to me about this, who are more informed on this issue than most of my colleagues in Congress. And I don't know whether that's, I don't know where that's all coming from. But I also think in our educational system in general, we need to integrate lessons on the environment, and I would also add nutrition in our curriculum. You don't have to teach new separate classes, but you can teach math and science and also teach some of these lessons about nutrition and about our environment. I think every school ought to have a garden. I think every classroom ought to have a tower garden so kids know how their food is grown and they can start understanding the value of nutrition. And I think that and again, I think a lot of the schools in this area are teaching lessons on the climate crisis to their students, and that gives me great hope, because quite frankly, the problem is people our age. Right? And the solution and the pressure right now is coming from people who are much younger. We had an amendment on a bill that Ayanna Presley brought up on this HR1 campaign elections bill we had about lowering the voting age to 16. I voted for it because you know what? I mean, I've been so impressed by the knowledge and expertise coming from our young people. So I think that's it. And let me just say one thing to the gentleman who had the question, who had the issue with the apartment and the oil and stuff like that. One of the problems when they say there's a lack of capacity and just switch over to gas, well, in order to get that capacity, they want you to invest in a multi-gazillion-dollar infrastructure that will mean that we will be relying on another fossil fuel, for years and years and years to come. So if we're going to invest all that money, we should be able to find a way to help, especially in low-income neighborhoods, a way to help offset the high costs, whether it's electricity or solar or whatever. There's a way around this, but the gas companies have been very, very good about saying, well, lack of capacity, all we need to do is build a pipeline. That pipeline you will all pay for. and it's not going to be cheap. And it'll mean that we'll be relying on that form of energy for the foreseeable future. But thank you for your question.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that is great. And I agree with Jim. I agree. We don't have to worry about any 14-year-olds. They believe the science is real. They believe that the planet is dangerously warming. They believe that human activity is principally responsible, and they believe that we have a moral responsibility to take action as the leading country in the world, because cumulatively over 200 years, still the majority of the CO2 is red, white, and blue, and therefore we have to be the leaders. So I think young people are in the lead on this, and that's why we have kids all over the country who are leading on these strikes, and why this movement now is much more powerful than it's ever been. It's been the young people, and we have to get older people, to buy in, because it kind of goes across all families, Democrat, Republican, and independent. Young people believe in the science. They've been trained well, and they're ready to go. So I think this intergenerational compact is going to be key. So we thank you all so much for being here. And I was just going to finish up on one final note. Can we do this? Well, so from my perspective, I was the chairman over telecommunications in the 1990s. No one had a cell phone. It looked like the only person who had cell phones were really wealthy people, and it was the size of a brick, and Gordon Gekko had one in Wall Street, the movie, but ordinary people didn't have one. It cost 50 cents a minute. It was analog. No one had it. I moved over with some other people. We moved over 200 megahertz of spectrum, but we prohibited the first two companies, the monopolies, from bidding. So we created a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh cell phone license. 3 years later, you had a flip phone in your pocket. It was under 10 cents a minute. The revolution was on. 10 years later, there's another young person. They said, tell you what we could do? We could put a computer with the same power as that which was on the Apollo mission in your pocket. And now we walk around with that computer. By the way, so don't 800 million people in Africa, okay, because we invented it. And we then, in 1996, I was the lead Democratic author, we passed the Telecommunications Act, or another way of saying it is the broadband bill. Not one home in America had broadband in February of 1996. Today, for a 12-year-old, she thinks she has a right to a 50-inch HD interactive screen while she's holding her wireless device in her hand. Who had that on the scoreboard 20 years ago? People would have thought it was impossible. But American ingenuity got unleashed because we broke down the monopolies. We allowed the innovation to take place. And, ladies and gentlemen, with the Green New Deal, we're going to do to the energy sector what we did to the black rotary dial phone. We're going to be looking at it in the rearview mirror of history. Thank you all so much.
Thank you
for coming out here with the great Jim McGovern, your congressman.